Welcome to Complete Kids Online, friendly discussions about autism and other developmental disabilities. Learn how working together is working better, one conversation at a time.
Hello, welcome to Complete Kids Online. I'm Gina.
And I'm Bob.
And we are joined today by Kourtney.
Good morning.
Kourtney is one of our parents here at Complete Kids. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
And your son is?
Jaxon.
And you guys go to?
Baldwin
Clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all square.
Yes. Yeah, let's start off. Tell us a little bit about who Jaxon is.
Okay, Jackson's a 7-year-old.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah. Diagnosed right at 3.
Mm-hmm.
I knew something was right around 1.
So expand on that a little bit, Kourtney. Like, what was some things you started to notice that you were like, hey, let me investigate?
The first thing was he wouldn't respond when I would call his name, like turn. And I said, okay, is he not hearing? That was the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
He had fluid on his ears. All right, let's get the surgery. He was like one of the youngest that really went through this surgery in Atlanta, but real quick, 15 minutes, cool. Still no response. It's like, okay, we're missing something here, because he went from looking at me and babbling and singing to nothing at all. I would even stand in front of his face and kind of like, no reactions. I'm like, okay. So I started asking people. My mom's a principal, so I'm like asking her. She says, well, you do know kids develop their own rate, right? Cool. No. You know, we moved here to Charlotte. Pediatrician is most important because they're the gatekeepers,
Absolutely.
Right? So I'm talking to his pediatrician, and she said, well, we can't diagnose him until 3. However, you're spot on. You're on to something. So what we did was document it. She's like, document, because when he goes up for that testing, he's not going to do everything in there in a matter of 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So I recorded, I kept a journal, took pictures of things that I saw, and just made a timeline of like everything.
Just to interrupt, that's for anybody watching or listening. I think that's great advice for us. For my, I get them mixed up, psychologist, sorry, to help them out.
Absolutely.
Because to your point, 2 hours is a very
They're
fine
not going to end and they don't know the person. So
Right.
What they would normally do at home, they're probably going to be remiss to do it there, or either even more aggravated at a level that maybe they're not, right? So I just recorded. Got in right, like literally weeks before his 3rd birthday. A behavioral specialist, I handed her a notebook, showed her videos. She even got him to do a few things in there. And she was like, you diagnosed him yourself. Like literally, she was like, you literally did my work for me. So I'm like, okay, where do we go? Speech and occupational first, which they matter. I'll tell anybody, like people are like, well, occupational, does he really need it? Yes. Because it's speech and physical therapy combined. Like, that's really what it is. That's how I look at it. Without occupational therapy, Jaxon is now fully dressing himself and undressing himself and being able to really use those fine motor skills. If it wasn't for Hannah, shout out to Hannah. If it wasn't for Hannah, a lot of these things would not happen. Like, seriously, Hannah is my girl when it comes to getting him. Hannah, you saved my life. Like, no, seriously.
Is she paying you? Be honest, Kourtney.
You know, maybe in hugs, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, other than that, I just love her. It matters.
Yeah.
Also, another thing that matters, you know, I tell parents all the time when they're like, how do you look for therapists? Your child will tell you. And it doesn't mean that the therapist is bad. They just don't mix. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. There's no problem with that, because you have to put them in the best environment where they're open to receive whatever therapy there is they're receiving. But in order to do that, they have to be in such a huge vulnerable space to take that on. Like, you know, it's a trust factor, you know, so you got to weave through it a little bit, you know, and really I really watch him. He'll tell me everything I need to know. Like and you know, you'll learn to know the difference between manipulation or it's just not working, because Jaxon is smart. He knows, oh, if I flap a little bit, maybe I'll get this really quickly. You know, if I do it just enough, or no, he can't take it. It's overwhelming for him. This is an issue. Let's fix it, you know, or not fix it, but let's solve whatever it is that he's feeling. Let's find an answer. So anyway, got that done. COVID hit. I turned my house into like a classroom and like a therapy place. I mean, you really think a 3-year-old is going to do therapy online? Like,
Yeah.
harassing a bit much, right? Tense, all that stuff he wants to do. I think he's not paying attention. Lo and behold, one day I'm in the hallway. I hear him 5, 4, 3. I'm like,
Wow.
oh my God. Then I hear uno, dos, tres. I'm like, what? I'm like, oh my God, like he's talking, and I'm watching him just literally develop right in front of my eyes. And when I heard that, what it taught me was give it to him. He may not respond right away.
It's absorbing.
He's hearing it, though.
Mm-hmm.
He's hearing it. And I have to allow him the timeline to tell me that he's hearing it. I can't, it's not something, say this. If Johnny has 2 apples and you take one, I can't do, that's not how he functions, right? So in that moment, I was like, oh, this kid is a lot smarter than I'm giving him credit for, right? Like, he's a problem solver, too. Scary, but it can get scary. Prime example, I'm in the kitchen watching from the corner. I have my cookies on the 3rd shelf in the pantry. His cookies are on the 1st, but he wanted my cookies, right? Way too high for him to get to. So I'm watching him, like, let's see what he's going to do. He finds his stool. He stands on it. He realizes he's still not tall enough. He takes the garbage can.
Oh, no.
He leverages it on the doorknob so he can pull himself up on it and taps it enough
To get it down.
before it falls down. He puts his tablet down. He gets down. He picks up his cookies. My cookies. And now I'm like standing in the kitchen like, okay, buddy. He turns around. He looks at me. He's like, and I'm like, you know what? After all that, you can get it. You didn't even bother me. Like, you fixed your own issue. Like, I like it, but let's not do it with my things. You know what I mean?
The 4th shelf.
Exactly. Like, we really went crazy with it. But it shows you how their minds think if
Yeah.
you allow them the space and opportunity to process, right? Like, my mom kind of didn't really understand it at first. Like, she was like, you're going to let you parent him so freely. And I had to break it down to her. He's not going to walk in a straight line like you, but that's okay.
Right.
We're still getting in Target.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he may not color in the lines, but doggone it, he colored on a piece of paper, and that's all I care about. If he feels like it's beautiful, I feel like it's beautiful too. It's his interpretation. I mean, if you got like paintings selling for like, $100 with a dot on it, like, come on, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So it's like interpretation. So it's like, you just gotta kind of know what's really important to parent. Him coloring in lines is, ask yourself, have you been paid for coloring on the lines?
Exactly.
In the lines?
Right.
Exactly.
Like, no, honestly.
Yeah.
Have you been paid for knowing the circumference of the stop sign that you're at? No.
Not one
once.
penny.
Not one penny. So it's like, no, I want him to be kind. I want him to be responsible. I want him to be inclusive. I want him to be loving. I want him to be able to advocate for himself. I want him to advocate for others. I care more about that than I do 1 + 1 = 2. Now, do I want him to know that?
Right.
Absolutely. Everything is not, it doesn't have to be so stringent. Like, let it flow. You know what I mean? Just let it flow. Your kid will tell you, like, every time.
So, you're actually hitting it a little bit anyway, Kourtney. But, talk about the one thing we hear from newer parents going through this whole process is, the overwhelming feeling at the very beginning. So just talk about that and maybe give some advice. You're somebody that's been along it a little bit, to the people newer.
I literally just was talking to one of Jackson's classmates' mother the other day. She's in the process. And the process is just like grief.
Right. What is it? Denial?
It's denial, anger, right. You're upset, you're lost, like you're all of these things, right? It's the same thing. Because you are grieving what you thought your child was going to be, what you've envisioned in your mind since you found out you were carrying this child, right? So all of that goes out the window. You're scared. You don't know where to start. It's so overwhelming because all you're being told is what's wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? Your child Jackson was at a 14-month comprehension. You know what I mean? And when you hear that and you're like, but my kid is 3, can climb up and get in a trampoline by himself. Like, what do you mean? Like, you're hearing this, and so you are thinking it's more wrong than right. And how do I fix all of this? Because you think you're trying to say, how do I fix it? And that's really the wrong avenue to go. There's nothing wrong.
I think that's great advice.
There's nothing wrong.
A lot of people think, all right, I got to fix this thing.
It's nothing
There's
to
nothing
fix.
to be fixed. Yeah.
It is nothing wrong. You have to take yourself out of it because it's fact over feelings, right? You have to remove your feelings and look at the facts, and then let the facts allow you to then find the emotion to deal with it, because it is an emotional journey, like it is. But when you take that, oh my God, my kid can't, and say, oh my God, how can he or she? It opens up the way you look at it differently. I was so against the AAC device. I was against it because you're not going to hinder him from talking. Well, me and his speech therapist, we went, you know what I mean? Because me and therapists have a really good relationship. Talk to me. Like, give it to me raw. If you feel like I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing, tell me, listen, girl, you got to pull back, or we need more of this. Whatever it is, that's how, you got to be, because they're an extension of me when I'm not around. Also, they're doing things that I'm not like. Listen, it's not my ministry to get into some of those spaces. I can't be a speech therapist. I don't want to be a speech therapist. I want to be mom, right? So once you break that down, the A to C device, I'm like, no, because it's gonna hinder. I started talking to more people. You got to be willing to listen to. You got to be willing to listen. Speech therapist is like, I'm telling you, just think about it. My mom, I'm telling you, but just think about it. You have to have those honest, his pediatrician, I'm telling you, but just think about it. And so I started thinking more and more and more. And then it finally hit me, what is it going to hurt to try? Because if this can give him another avenue to communicate, this is also keeping him safe. And I'm big on safety, which is why I'm big on him being independent. Because unfortunately, we have not so honest people around this world, right. You know what I mean? And also him being independent is also a form of confidence. You want him to be confident in himself that he can do certain things, right? I don't want him to be a 21-year-old and still be a baby. Like, that's not happening. Like, I want you to mature. You're no different than anybody else. You just see it differently, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. He got the AAC device. He's doing wonders with it. I'm like, wow, this is what I'm missing, But it took me to say, okay, let's try it. Let's see what. If it's too much, you'll find out. You'll find out quickly. Right. Like, you'll find out pretty quickly if you know your child. But it's the maturity, it's the emotional intelligence that you have to develop. Because most people go to where you originally were, right? I'm just going to yell and scream, and I'm going to make this happen. But what it is, the biggest lesson in that is his behavior is not a morality thing. Right. He's been a baby that only knew to scream to get attention. That's like a dog peeing in your house for 6 months, and then you try to change it. Right. You kind of, open that up for that. So it's not a morality thing, right? It's not a good or bad. It's just, okay, how can we function better? What tools can I give you, or what cues can I take to make sure my approach is the correct one for this form of environment? So I'm not escalating the problem, because that's what I was doing when he first got diagnosed. I'm escalating the issue because I'm thinking, no, you're going to listen to me. You're not going to do this. Like, boy, do you want me to take your tablet away? Like, but that was not working, because that's not what he needed. He needed me to say, all right, how can I help you? What is it that you need? Right. If you can tell me what you need, I can tell you whether we can go or not, And if with them, especially at his young age, is, okay, you can't just strip them of nothing, right? You have to say, okay, we can't have this, but we can have this. You got to give them a little option, because, look, let me tell you something. Jaxon may want to wear, his Black Panther costume to school sometimes. And I'm okay with it. You want to know why? It's clean, it's clothes, and, it's wearable, for God's sake. I'm not about to fight you with this.
Right.
I got to get you to school. They're probably going to think you're cool when you get there anyway. He's already had people in this class wearing life vests because he decided to wear his life jacket to school one day. And then the kids, I'm getting messages from kids' moms like, did Jaxon wear a life vest? Because Marco was begging for it. And I'm like...
It's a trendsetter.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny.
I'm like, yeah, well, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry,
So what would 2023, what can 2023 Kourtney tell as advice to 2019, I guess, Kourtney? When you first, during the first diagnosis, what would you go back in time and tell that person, being yourself? What word of advice would you give?
I would tell myself that it's okay. And I will tell myself, y'all gonna make me emotional.
Get this on film.
I would forgive myself because no diagnosis is easy to hear. Especially it's one of a child lacks communication skills, right? So I have to tell myself you were doing the very best you can with what you knew, and that it's okay for help. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. Absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. You did nothing wrong. Actually, you did more right than you did wrong. And that it's a process, and to trust it. And to not feel guilty for setting those boundaries and parameters so that your child can function on a high level. I felt guilty about not showing up to functions, Christmas being different, trying to force him into spaces because it's the typical thing to do, but it's not typical for him. So now Christmas is not a big deal. It's okay.
Even if it's in September.
Even if it's in September. You know what I mean?
He's still looking forward to it. He's still excited about it.
He wore his Santa Claus hat just the other day. I'm not even lying. So I would just tell myself that it's okay, and find your tribe. Everybody don't understand it. And I cannot hold what other people's comprehension level of it and willingness to have compassion and get in the ring with you with it. I can't hold them accountable or responsible for that too, because guess what? Everybody is not able to handle that. Me, I got to handle it. He's my kid. I got to. I mean, I could just, whatever, but that's not in me, right? He's my kid. So that's really what I would say to myself. And I probably would have started that journey sooner, putting those boundaries and telling myself, okay, if they don't understand this, that's on them.
Right.
And it's all right. But I have to make him, I tell people all the time, I get why y'all invite Jaxon to weddings and to these big events or whatever. I get it because you really want me to come. But what you have to understand, that's work for me.
Right.
It's work.
Right.
My sister got married. Jaxon was in the wedding. I couldn't be in the wedding because who's going to make sure because he might not want to come down the aisle. You know what I mean? He might stand in the middle of the aisle and decide to take his shoes off and throw them in the air. We have no clue, right? And as much as I was so excited for him to be a part of something, despite some of his functionalities, right? It is so much work for me. It is so much because he had a moment, literally 10 minutes before he was about to walk down. So here I am with bubbles back there blowing come on, it's going to be okay. So it's more work, you know what I mean? So it's it's okay to not sign up for work because we're working when most people are asleep.
Right.
I read a study that said parents with children on the spectrum, stress level is equal to a soldier in live combat.
Yeah.
Audie's referenced that study
we've
before.
heard that one before. Also, I think that we as a company understand that, one of the things that we put on a pretty high shelf is not just treatment for the kids, but respite for the parents, because we understand how difficult and how stressful it can
yes. Because it's lonely.
be.
It is very lonely. It is really lonely because in one instance you want to take them sometimes where you're like, okay, let's go. But in the other instances, I just want to have a glass of wine by myself for like 10, 15 minutes.
Just have a little decompression.
Like just a little bit of time to dial back. You know what I mean? Like, and to know my kid is safe and I don't have to like be on pins and needles, because you just can't leave him with regular babies. You know what I mean? You just can't do that either. And then me too, if I'm about to leave the door and Jackson's having a full-fledged meltdown, I'm not going.
Right.
Because I know the toll that puts on him. And that's mommy knows best.
Right. Especially
in him and I's dynamic, right? I can pretty much figure it out pretty quickly what's going on. So that's that balance too, that struggle. Or like they'll call me. They called me last week before last. Jackson's really having a hard day, right? Like, okay, you don't have to come get him, but they know I like to know. Because I need to know what I'm walking into, you know what I mean? I'm in my thought process.
Well, we see, and Gina, as a former SLP, will tell you that we can almost determine the amount of progress from a kid from the engagement level of the parent. Right away. If that parent is engaged, we're like, okay, that kid is going to see a lot of progress. A disengaged parent, it's very difficult.
Here's the issue. And like I'm trying to figure out how to bridge this gap. I've even talked to Audie about this. It is almost what you're saying to me, right? Like, say you have Jackson's speech, right? It's something this is new to me. A lot of things that you're saying to me are going over my head because I'm trying to process that my kid needs speech therapy, right? But I'm also trying to process what you're trying to tell me amongst the 5,000 other things that are coming at me for the child and God knows whatever else, right? There is so it's already tensed. It is a communication gap, not because you're not communicating and not because the parent isn't. They just don't know what you're trying to tell them. And it's like, okay, you're a speech therapist telling me this. Do you know what I go through on a daily basis? Where it's someone like me. Come here, girl, let me talk to you real quick. I've noticed this snap with your kid. Jaxon had similarities here. Try this and call me if you need me to talk through some things because you need to create balance and smoothness throughout the day. Because a routine, total difference. You can get out the door and ease. You might want a bike, or a helmet, but, you're still going to get out the door within 15 minutes or so. It's that gap. So what happens, and I've really been sitting back and really watching this. Like, I'll sit up there at Baldwin all the time, and I literally watch it unfold. They're so overwhelmed. They don't know where to start to ask. They also feel intimidated to ask because it's like, I'm just a mom and you're a speech therapist. You have all these great, they kind of look at it like that. So it's like, I don't know. I'm out of my wheelhouse to know what to do. So that's a lot of why I truly believe the engagement piece for a lot of kiddos isn't there with their parent because they don't know how. They really don't know how. And there is nobody that they trust enough to talk them through it. So
that partnership is so important because we're only with them, 30 minutes a week.
That's it. It is, they don't know what it is. I'm literally walking a lady through right now with her kid. I held Jaxon back for a year. He was not mature enough. ABA, listen. Jaxon can go in a restaurant now and sit down and eat, wait for his food, ask to go to the bathroom, wait for his drink, sit there patiently with his tablet while I'm having a conversation with my mom across the table, and it's smooth as gravy. Whereas in 2 years ago, you better cross your fingers. You know, you better, we can't go in right yet because the table's not ready yet, and he's not going to wait, you know? So it had to be, Mom, go in there and wait for the table, then call us when they're about to seat you, or call, you go get seated and then tell me where you're sitting and I'll lead him straight to you, right? I'll make sure we go to before we leave the house, we're going to the bathroom, we're doing this, we're doing that, so that we have none of these questions while we're out, none of these problems while we're out, da-da-da. ABA was the difference maker, because it tells them and shows them and gives them the tools to how to process their emotions and in different spaces. Now, also as a parent, though, you got to expose it to them and give them a shot.
So we learned a lot. We appreciate that. We're actually, I feel like we still have more to learn.
Absolutely.
So why don't we do a part 2, if you don't mind?
For sure.
And we'll break here and we'll release a part 2 of this podcast in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Good deal.
To be continued.
To be
Absolutely.
continued.
To continue the conversation, visit the links to our website, Facebook page, or Instagram in the comments.